Good morning, everybody. It's Tracy Brown. It's Sunday morning. It's 9:15 a.m. Central Time. So I am glad you have joined me for the CSLDallas Sunday morning Science of Mind class. It's the last Sunday of the year. And how great is that to be able to spend it together right here, diving into the concepts, the principles taught in the Science of Mind textbook by Ernest Holmes. If you've been with us over the last few weeks, you know that we will be starting today on page 362 with the section God, Infinite Personality. And as I'm reading some of what is written, I invite you to think about, how does this apply to me? And how do I think of God? And what does infinite personality mean anyway? Because after reading a little bit of this, I'll be inviting you to share your examples or ask questions that will help it make even more sense to you. Before we dive into that, please just join me by taking a breath and centering in this goodness that is this last Sunday of 2021. Knowing that it is Boxing Day and it is the first day of Kwanzaa, it is another example of a day that is perfect. A day that is perfectly unfolding, and we can rejoice and be glad in it. And so it is. How great it is to dive into God, Infinite Personality, if you just joined us, on page 362. And as Dr. Petra has referred throughout this month, as she has been guiding the conversation from this chapter, Finding the Christ, we couldn't have planned this. Like, sometimes we say, you can't make this stuff up. We go through the Science of Mind textbook in sequence, and here it is, the month of December, with all of the holy days and the holidays, and we have been talking about identifying and recognizing and finding the Christ. So God, infinite personality, God or spirit is supreme, infinite, limitless personality. And we should think of the divine being as such, as completely responsive to everything that we do. There should come to us a sense of communion, a spontaneous sense of an irresistible union. If we had this, we would demonstrate instantaneously. An evolved soul is always a worshiper of God. She worships God in everything, for God is in everything. God not only is in everything, but she is more than everything. She is in. Ye are the light of the world. That is God in us. All that we are is God, yet God is more than all we are. The nearer consciousness comes to this truth, the more cosmic sweep it has, the more power it has. The realization that God is personal to all who are receptive to the divine influx enables us to communicate with spirit, receiving a direct answer from it. This Jesus was able to do. He was able to balance the personal and the impersonal attributes of being. For the law is only a natural force, while spirit is always self-knowing. In studying the life and teachings of Jesus, the most unique character of history, we discover a few simple ideas underlying his philosophy, the embodiment of which enabled him to become the Christ. Fundamental to his concept of life was his belief in a universal spirit, which he called God, or the Heavenly Father. This Heavenly Father was an intelligence to which he consciously talked and from which undoubtedly he received a definite reply. Jesus located God in his own soul. So complete was his realization that he was unable to find a place where the being of Jesus began and the being of God left off, or where the being of God began and Jesus ceased to be. This Jesus discovered and taught that whatever is true of man, of the reality of humanity, that is the divine presence within us. So I'm going to stop there. The next piece goes into God as deity and Jesus recognizing that, deity does not mean above, but that Jesus had this realization of placing God at the center. And that made it clear that God was the realization of an absolute law. And so just in this first page, this first part of this section on God, the infinite personality, remember that the reason we're talking about God as an infinite personality is in the context of finding the Christ and finding the Christ nature within each one of us, and that it is really there's no magic. Jesus did not use magic. Jesus represented and then embodied the Christ. Christ is not a person. Jesus embodied the Christ consciousness. And what this section is kind of giving us the key to unlock, so how did Jesus think about this infinite intelligence that we call God or spirit? And the first piece of that is that fundamental to his concept was a belief in a universal spirit, which he called God, that there is an intelligence that is immense, that is infinite, that is eternal, and it operates in, as, and through each one of us, or from the context of the Christ, from the context of Jesus, it operated in, as, and through him, which means it operates in, as, and through me, and you, and you, and you. All we must do is use it and behave and choose in alignment with it. So God is the infinite personality that expresses in and through each one of us to the degree that we recognize it and allow it. Recognize it and allow it. So the next part is really juicy, but I want to stop. I'm going to stop for a moment and just see if there are any questions or any comments. And remember, before I started reading, I asked you to think about how you recognize what I'm talking about, how it resonates with you, or where it's confusing to you. So Ryan, how about you let people know how they can participate?
Well, hello, everybody here in the room. Hi. It looks weird because I'm on a microphone, but we're also live streaming online. So hello to all those that are watching us on Zoom, and thank you for joining us once again this week. And to everybody who is watching us on the Facebook Live, we'd love to see you, and we're grateful you're here as well. And like Tracy had mentioned, this is an interactive discussion, so we kind of break it down into a couple pieces. For anybody here in the room, just raise your hand. I gotta stop here because our iconic Richard, the cameraman, is not here. So you kind of see I'm riding solo dolo. So, give me a second to hobble over to you. I'll unmute so the people online can actually hear your questions and comments too. And those who are on the Zoom room, just hit the raise your hand icon located down below. And for both people on the Zoom and Facebook Live, as always, you can put your questions and comments in the chat. I always keep those anonymous, so we have a safe container to share our experiences. So with that being said, I just want to, anybody in the room have any questions? Or maybe here on Zoom, we just want to poll to make sure that we have anybody's questions answered.
And if you don't, I'm really eager to get into the next session, but that I don't want to go 40 minutes and then go, oh, I was supposed to ask.
I think everybody's ready for you to dive a little bit deeper.
Great. So in that first section again, Ernest Holmes reminds us that Jesus was operating as Christ consciousness. And because of that, he was able to do and say things that look like miracles to us because we're not fully immersed in that consciousness all the time. But we aspire to do that as we study more and go deeper into our own spirituality. So the last sentence that I read was, so complete was this realization that Jesus had, that he was unable to find a place where the being of Jesus began and the being of God left off, or the being of God began and Jesus ceased to be. He couldn't find that. There was no demarcation. And so it was so integrated within his mind, his body, and the way he behaved and the choices that he made that it could demonstrate instantaneously. Moving on, last chapter on page 363, if you've joined us. This Jesus discovered and taught that whatever is true of humanity, of the reality of human nature, is the divine presence within. Coupled with this dynamic realization, with this enlightening concept of deity, of placing God at the center of one's own being, was the realization of an absolute law, obeying this will. When this will was in harmony with the spirit of truth, obeying the will, when the will is in harmony with the spirit of truth. This concept of God and humanity, God and man, God and person, and the relationship between them places the philosophy of Jesus in a whole different category than other people. Okay, Ernest Holmes didn't quite write it like that, but I can't read it. A whole different reality than that of other teachers. Okay, listen up. Christ is the image of God, the likeness of the Father, the Son of the universe, the man that Spirit conceives. Christ is not limited to any person, nor does he appear in only one age. He is as eternal as God. He is God's idea of himself. God's own self-knowingness. For Christ to be found in us is to put off the old man with all his mistakes and doubts and put on the new man who is always certain that he is beloved of the Father. The Christ always comes with power and might, awakened by the still small voice of truth. Now, there are a couple of sentences in here that I must repeat, and I really want to know how they land with you. Christ is the image of God, the likeness of the Father, the child of the universe, the person that Spirit conceives. Christ is not limited to any person, nor does Christ appear in only one age. She is as eternal as God. He is God's idea of himself. One's own self-knowingness. For Christ to be found in me is to put off the old me with all my mistakes and doubts and put on the new me who is always certain that I am the beloved of the Father. Right there, when we are finding the Christ within, we are grounded in this place where we understand the infinite nature of God, or as this section is titled, the infinite personality, but not personality the way that we think of it. Oh, introvert, extrovert. Oh, I like that person or don't. Infinite personality, infinite expression. And we are made in the spiritual image and likeness of that. And when we choose, when we speak, when we behave in alignment with knowing there is no separation between the source of light and my life, we are operating from Christ consciousness. So let's see what we've got. Ryan?
Yeah, so I see that we have a hand raised here in the chat, so I'm gonna go ahead and call Connie into the room. Connie, you wanna unmute yourself and join the conversation?
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Tracy. Good morning, everybody. I just have a quick question. Is this so because we are all expressions of being, expressions of spirit?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So I mean, that's the answer. I'm so
Yeah.
glad you asked it in a way that was a easy yes or no. And we forget. I think that's a lot of what's in this chapter is the reminder for us. I mean, if we go back to the very introduction in the textbook where it talks about, those 4 introductory chapters, what is it? Like, what is God and how does it operate? What is spirit? What is infinite intelligence? How can we use it? All of that is at the very beginning. And then this chapter specifically about the Christ consciousness. It reminds us there's only one. It is expressing in an infinite number of ways. It has created me and you and you and you in a unique combination of characteristics to be in the world experiencing humanity, humanness. And it can only do that through each one of us. However, our actions can use spiritual law. We just have to understand what that is and then choose it.
Yes, So before I go to this next question, anybody in the room have a comment they'd like to share how this landed with you? Okay, but I'll come over to you right now.
Oh, okay.
Actually. Sorry, one man show over here. Here you go.
Good morning, everybody. This is Gordon. It reminded me, your reading and especially what you're focusing on with Thomas Troward, because he makes it's a simple point, but that's the way a lot of the science of mind is. It's simple. It's not easy sometimes. But the point he made is that there's different levels of intelligence and achievement that we go through and everything. And he says the challenge is people think that the average person is what we see is the law of averages and everything else. And he says what we have to come to the understanding of is that the average person is the divine, and you build from that. And he says only until you come to that realization that you can take the next step, and as a result humanity can take the next step to what's out there.
I love that. Thank you, Gordon. And so very true. Thomas Troward has this beautiful piece of work around intelligence in general and the different levels of intelligence, and that everything that has been created has its own level of intelligence. And, there is intelligence, because we tend to think of intelligence as like our IQ and what we know and what we've studied and what people taught. But when we are talking in a spiritual conversation about infinite intelligence, we are talking about the infinite intelligence of that which created all of the universe. And it's not book learning. It is the intelligence of an acorn growing into an oak tree. The intelligence of how to do that is implanted in that little tiny acorn, and it doesn't think, it bees, it becomes, it does, it lives, it's intelligence. A worm is intelligent in that it knows how to move, but not so much because it had to go to school and learn that. It is inbred within that worm, how its body parts move together. A bird flying, the sun rising, that intelligence is what is the function that has been placed within the being. And then with humanity being at the level of intelligence that we have been gifted or designed with, our intelligence is when our raw intelligence is Christ consciousness, that we are born with the capability to do that. And what we do often is we teach ourselves out of it. So I love the comment you made, Gordon, about, the average person, are looking around, and the law of averages, which Troward and which Ernest Holmes talks about fairly frequently, it is the common denominator of multiple consciousnesses influencing your individual life or the life of all humanity, or of CSLDallas, or of the school or the business you are involved in. And that's because everything, all of that to get to this point, that's because everything we do actually does contribute to what Ernest Holmes refers to as race consciousness, what I usually will say so people don't get confused, cultural consciousness. So there is nothing I do that doesn't affect you. There's nothing that you do that doesn't affect your neighbor or the stranger at the Costco. Everything we do affects everyone else, as we can see with climate change and global warming and racism and poverty and all of the things that are societally happening in the world. So, so thanks for kind of triggering that, Gordon, and it's for the reminder that if we all choose from our highest and deepest place, the highest God and the innermost God are the same God. It's a basic science of mind principle. If we would choose from our higher place consistently, and everyone else was doing the same, we would culturally be having a very different experience. But we can't do that without having awareness that the Christ is within us. So if we have somebody online, we're going to go to, and or we're going to go to someone else in the room.
Hi, I'm Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Hi. What really stood out to me is just this is God's idea of himself.
Yes.
And if God is perfect, whole, and complete, that's the place that we can start from. But then we get into the cultural consciousness. Then we get into our own choices and our own beliefs, which have started with our cultural consciousness, which goes to our families, everybody in our lives. And I've been doing some work on this with living the science of mind recently, and cultural race consciousness has come up, and it's given me a whole different understanding of the race consciousness. It's not just about our differences. It's also about just basic beliefs that we have carried from thousands of years forward from the consciousness of being the monarchies and that we came from to a place to where we're all equal based on a religious belief, a Protestant belief in this country, which brought those beliefs in, but that's not, I mean, it all becomes so convoluted with all of the different belief systems. And Ernest Holmes talks about how every religious and belief is good, but we need to put them all together so that because they're all basically have the underlying same beliefs. And I don't know. And it says here, we need to put off the old man. We need to put off the old man and put on the new man. And to me, that's the cultural belief system that we have.
Yeah, both individually and collectively. So I can put away the old me. I can recognize the old me and the mistakes I've made and the choices I've made, and then put on the new me that is energized by and guided by my knowing of the truth. And I love your reframe of that. If I've been made in the likeness of that which created me so that it can express itself, and I know and believe it is whole, perfect, and complete, then, oh, you mean when I was created whole, perfect, and complete, and I've added all this stuff. I mean, I love that reminder because that is the experience of being human. I mean, that really is, right? We are here to have the human experience, which means we are affected by, we are taught, we are guided by, we see the examples of human choices. And human choices can reflect the infinite nature of God, or because of free will, can reflect something different. And so the more of us that really align ourselves in with the spiritual choices that reflect spiritual law and the infinite wholeness of the divine, And think about it, we happen to be in the month of December. And from Thanksgiving through New Year's, or maybe even Epiphany, yeah, right, there are all these holidays and holy days to give us an opportunity to remember. We've been busy all year long doing all kinds of stuff, but this is our opportunity this season to remember, to recommit, to shift and release the old man and choose the new man. One more thing, and that is Gary talked about all the different belief systems and the different religions and all of that. And so humanity has been created with all of the diversity by design. Different parts of the world, different eras, different times. The diversity is not an accident, and it is not bad. So what Ernest Holmes did that makes science of mind different and so interesting is he did study so many different paths. He's studied all the major denominations or spiritual belief systems and said, aha, what is the common thread that is underneath the surface of all the different practices that these different religions or spiritual paths have? And he said many times, I did not create anything new. I have synthesized the common message of the mystics of all of the major paths. So when we are studying science of mind, we are recognizing that we are connecting in with the deepest message that weaves through all paths, which is why we say all paths lead to God. Many paths, one God. So great. Ryan, you got anything for me?
Yeah, it looks like Anita has her hand raised. So Anita, would you like to join the conversation and unmute yourself?
Welcome, Anita.
Good morning, everybody. So, I'm loving this conversation about now are we the sons and daughters of God? That God is forever begetting his children. And so, what a perfect example Jesus was to embody that Christ consciousness so that we could understand what it means to be born again, to lay down the old man, as was spoken of, or the old woman, which, if you want to be gender inclusive here, and to rise up then into this new consciousness and this new awareness of the true reality of our own divine nature. And so, I get constantly reminded, when I'm referring back to, as Gary had brought up, our Protestant religions here in the US, but, and having come out of that, the Bible so often reminds me, about my own nature, going back even into the Old Testament and first being called children of God. And yet then coming forward into the New Testament in Jesus, even talking to the sons of thunder, and now are ye the sons of God. And then Paul later on talking about now are you the children of God once again. And, it's just that coming into that childlike wonder and faith. And if we can get back to that natural faith and belief of the child, we would see so many things so much instantaneously because they just don't even question it.
Yes, yes, and yes.
That's my reminder for today.
And a good reminder it is. And we make things so complicated. They really don't have to be. We live in a complex world. There's lots of technology. There's, many different faith systems, many different kinds of people all around the globe. And when we go back to walk as Jesus walked, which is why we say he is the example, but not the exception. It is everything he did, and even he wrote, right, or he is quoted in the New Testament as having said, all the things that he did, you can do that and more. So there's no mistake that Ernest Holmes quotes the Bible a lot, and you can't read, 10 or 12 pages consecutively in the Science of Mind textbook without him referring to something that's in the Bible or actually quoting the Bible. So we don't have to be afraid of that or judge that. It's what can we learn from that? And this chapter on finding the Christ is all about finding the Christ within us and then living from that. Right.
You just started in one of the questions that I had that came in a little while ago. So, as we're saying here, Jesus is a good example of this. What is the separator between people, let's say yours truly, you're Ryan, and great examples like Jesus? What is the thing that elevates them to that level?
Great question. It's really, what did you say? Simple, but not easy, what Gordon said earlier. It's really simple. One is understanding that there is no separation. Two, belief that even once I know that and I've read it and I've heard Dr. Petra talk about it for 10 years, do I really believe it? And then so understanding or awareness, belief, action. Do I then live it? So once I believe it, do I live it? And though that's what creates a separation. So I can watch myself as I go through the week, through an hour, but as I go through the week, I can watch myself. Now, I definitely have the awareness and understanding. I absolutely have the belief that this is true. But my choices and actions don't always reflect it. So I worked on recognizing when I am truly living from Christ consciousness and the belief in no separation between me and that which made me. That there's no separation between me. I love the way that it's worded in this section where it's in talking about Jesus, he writes, so complete, well, he received a definite reply. Jesus located God in his own soul. So complete was this realization that he was unable to find a place where the being of Jesus began and the being of God left off, or where the being of God began and Jesus ceased to be. Now let's read that again and put ourselves into the sentence. I located God in my own soul. So complete was this realization that I was unable to find a place where the being of Tracy began and the being of God left off, or where the being of God began and Tracy ceased to be. It's not easy, it's simple, but that's the only thing that creates the the delay in demonstration, what looks like the failure to achieve the oneness. And before you start beating yourself up, let me add this. We are human. Jesus walked the earth as a human being. And we are human. So don't beat yourself up if you're having the physical experience of being lulled to sleep by cultural norms or being triggered into actions that do not reflect joy, peace, love, harmony, wholeness. Just recognize, oh, I am human. That is what happens in the human experience. But I am working every day to live more in the spiritual consciousness, in the consciousness of my divinity, than allowing the consciousness of my humanity to drive everything that I do. That's the challenge. And the more we operate from our Christ consciousness and integrate that into every thought, every word, every action, the more we will see, experience, and share instantaneous demonstrations. So Ryan, we've got just a few more minutes. Do you have any raised hands or questions in the chat?
Yes, looks like Connie, do you have one last thing that you'd like to share with us?
Thank you. This is magnificent, Tracy. Thank you so much. In the last, I don't know how long, I've been starting to recognize that different religions are simply expressions of one thing, cultural expressions of one thing, which is connection with God. So I am fascinated by learning about different religions. To me, it's fascinating because I'm an anthropologist at heart, but there's no competition there. You know, why should religions compete? They're all about one thing anyway. Let's join together in connection with God. So good.
I love that. They're all about the same thing, the connection with God, the living within the spiritual principle, these universal spiritual principles. So for those of you who have been to CSLDallas and know where our physical location is, this example I'm going to share will make perfect sense to you. For those of you who have not physically been here and you've only joined with us online, just take a deep breath and use a different landmark that works for you. So about a half mile away from CSLDallas, there is a shopping mall called the Galleria. And it's not far away. And if there are 10 of us in the room, and I give the instruction, leave now and go to, I'll meet you at the Galleria at noon. We'll all meet at the Galleria at noon. One person may leave the parking lot and turn left and go right and go 3 different blocks around and come to the Galleria. Another person may go out the back parking lot and turn left, but then go all the way down to Alpha. Another person may walk out the building and not get in a car and walk to the Galleria. A fourth person may call an Uber or Lyft and say, take me to the Galleria. Every one of us may take a different path, but we will meet at the Galleria at noon. When we think of all of our different religions as different paths to get to the Galleria, to get to and to experience and live and embody God, then we don't have that competition. And when we think of our individual lives as an opportunity to take an individual pathway to finding the Christ and living Christ consciousness in our daily lives, then we release any competition. We strengthen our recognition that there is no separation and we contribute to a better world. That is all the time we have this morning for the Science Mind class at CSL Dallas. I hope that you can join us in about 25 minutes. For our Sunday celebration, I'll be giving the talk talking about boundless love. And please check out CSLDallas.org and or our Facebook page to stay informed about upcoming classes, how you can donate to support the work that we do here. Let all be well. Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year. Bye for now.